Welcome to Reading English Daily. Today, we have a story that will take you on an unforgettable journey of courage, perseverance, and dreams. This is not just any story. It is about Kieran, a boy from a small village who once thought his future was limited by money, fear, and the words he could not speak. But as you follow his journey, you will see how even the smallest steps, the tiniest victories, and the courage to keep trying can change a life forever. In this story, you will travel with Kieran from dusty village roads to the bustling streets of the city. You will feel his nervousness when he first speaks English, his embarrassment when he struggles, and the joy and pride when he finally achieves something he once thought impossible. Every part of his journey is filled with lessons not just in English, but in life itself. Lessons about resilience, hope, and believing in yourself. As you listen, notice how words that seem difficult at first can become your tools for growth. Hear how confidence builds through practice, how mistakes are not failures but stepping stones, and how courage opens doors to new beginnings. Stick with us until the end, because this story will not only inspire you, it will help you improve your English reading, listening, and speaking all at the same time. So get comfortable, relax, and let's step into Kieran's world together. This is more than a story. It's a journey you can learn from, relate to, and carry into your own life. Let's begin. Chapter 1. A struggling village, a hidden dream. Kieran woke early, before the sun had risen over the dusty rooftops of his village. The air smelled faintly of dry earth and morning firewood, and the narrow paths were already stirring with the sounds of roosters and footsteps. 15 years old, he carried a small basket of vegetables to the market for his parents, moving silently among neighbors who greeted him with tired smiles. Life was simple, predictable, and, in many ways, safe. Yet beneath this calm routine, a restless thought lived in Kieran's heart, a dream that seemed almost impossible in a village like his. At school, the classroom was a small building with cracked walls and wooden benches. The blackboard was dusty, and the teacher's voice sometimes seemed far away. Kieran liked learning, he really did, but English was a wall he could not climb. The words felt slippery, refusing to stay in his mind. Tomorrow, building, opportunity. They tumbled out of his mouth awkwardly, or sometimes not at all. When the teacher asked a question, his throat tightened, his palms sweated, and he lowered his head, wishing he could disappear. Around him, classmates answered with ease, their voices confident and clear. Kieran felt the distance between their reality and his own, and the weight of it pressed down on him like the heavy sun over the village fields. Still, he could not let go of his dream. He wanted to study beyond these narrow roads, to read books he had never seen, to understand the world beyond the hills that framed his home. At night, after long days of work, he would sit under the dim lantern, imagining a life where money was not a worry and English was not a barrier. He pictured himself walking through a city bustling with people, learning, asking questions, and speaking without fear. The image was vivid, yet painfully distant, almost like a star too far to reach. Even in the midst of struggle, the village offered warmth. His mother's gentle humming while cooking, his father's steady hands repairing a worn tool, the children playing near the stream, all reminded Kieran of love and security. But these comforts could not fill the longing in his heart. The dream called to him louder than the familiar sights and sounds of home. He realized that to move toward it, he would have to step into discomfort, confront fear, and face the very challenges that made him hesitate every day in class. In that quiet, dusty village, Kieran's life seemed ordinary, yet his heart carried a spark of something extraordinary. The contrast between the simplicity of his surroundings and the vastness of his ambition created tension that he could feel in his chest every day. It was the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be, a space filled with fear, hope, and possibility. And deep inside, Kieran knew that something was about to happen, a small chance that could change everything, and he would have to be ready to seize it. This longing, this mix of fear and hope, set the stage for the opportunity that would soon appear, an unexpected invitation that could bridge the distance between his struggling village life and the future he dared to imagine. Chapter 2. A Glimmer of Opportunity. The village square was quiet that afternoon, dust swirling softly around the worn market stalls. Kieran walked slowly, carrying a small bundle of firewood for his family, when he noticed a stranger speaking with the school headmaster. The man wore crisp clothes and carried a stack of papers that looked important. Curious, Kieran edged closer, listening to the words he could barely understand. The teacher was talking about a scholarship program in the city, a chance for talented students to study at a school far beyond the hills of their village. Kieran's heart skipped a beat. Could this be real? Could he, a boy who struggled with English, have a chance at something so big? That evening, he shared the news at home. His parents sat quietly, faces lined with years of hard work, listening to him describe the opportunity. "It could change your life, Kieran," his father said softly, placing a rough hand on his shoulder. "We believe in you, even if it feels impossible." His mother nodded, eyes glimmering with pride and worry. They had so little, but their faith in him was endless. Their belief was a small fire warming the fear that had grown in his chest for years. Kieran's excitement fought with the nerves knotting his stomach. The scholarship was close, tangible, almost within reach. But there was a challenge he could not ignore. The entrance test and interview would be conducted entirely in English. Words that had once slipped from his memory now loomed larger than ever. He imagined himself standing before the examiners, tongue-tied, failing to answer, embarrassed in front of strangers. The fear felt real, heavy, almost suffocating. And yet, beneath it, hope glimmered, a tiny, bright spark that refused to be crushed. His best friend, Ravi, saw the conflict written on Kieran's face. "We can do this together," Ravi said, clapping a hand on his shoulder. "I'll help you practice every day. You can do it, Kieran. Just start small." The words, simple as they were, carried a weight that Kieran had not felt before. Support, encouragement, someone believing in him when he was not sure he could believe in himself. That was powerful. For the first time, the scholarship did not feel entirely impossible. That night, Kieran sat under the dim lantern, staring at the small stack of papers that described the scholarship. He imagined the school, the classrooms, the people speaking English fluently, and a life that stretched beyond the dusty village roads. Excitement coursed through him, mingled with a tremor of fear. The opportunity was here, waiting for him, but he had work to do. Preparation would be difficult. English would challenge him, and the clock was ticking. And yet, despite the worry, Kieran felt a thrill he had never known. The glimmer of possibility illuminated his small room, shining on his dreams that had once seemed so far away. His parents' faith, his friends' encouragement, and his own determination began to outweigh the fear. For the first time, he believed that with effort, courage, and persistence, he could step beyond the limits of his village, beyond the boundaries of his self-doubt, and move toward a life he had always imagined. The scholarship, the city, the unknown, all of it was daunting, but for Kieran, the glimmer of opportunity had arrived. It was small, fragile, and challenging, but it was real, and it was waiting for him to reach out and seize it. Chapter 3: The First Struggles. Kieran's first English lesson began with a mixture of excitement and dread. He sat on the worn wooden bench, notebook open, pencil trembling in his hand. Mrs. Sharma, the teacher, smiled warmly and began writing simple words on the board. Future, opportunity, dream. Kieran repeated them slowly, carefully, but the words felt slippery in his mouth, as if they had been coated in oil. Each mispronunciation made his stomach tighten, and he could hear the faint giggles of classmates who spoke more confidently. Even their kindness couldn't stop the wave of embarrassment that washed over him. During the practice exercises, Kieran stumbled over phrases that should have been easy. I want to become a future architect, he mumbled, each word dragging out painfully. He saw his classmates whisper and smile, and his cheeks burned. He wanted to disappear, to retreat into the safe quiet of his home, but the thought of the scholarship, the city, and everything he dreamed of kept him rooted in his seat. The excitement that had once filled him with hope now clashed sharply with the harsh reality of his limited skills. The real test came during a mock interview. The teacher asked, "Kieran, why do you want this scholarship?" He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His mind blanked, words scattering like leaves in the wind. Panic gripped him, and he could feel his heart pounding so loudly he was sure everyone could hear it. The silence stretched endlessly, broken only by the soft encouragement from Mrs. Sharma. "Take your time, Kieran." But taking his time felt impossible. The dream of studying in the city seemed to move further away with each passing second, and his confidence crumbled. Kieran left the classroom that day feeling defeated. The narrow path home felt longer than usual, and the familiar sounds of the village, the distant river, the clatter of pots, the chatter of neighbors, seemed distant and muted. He sat under the old banyan tree, staring at the dusty ground, repeating the words over and over in his mind. Future, opportunity, dream. Each attempt felt like failure, yet he repeated them again, refusing to give up completely. The fire of ambition still flickered in him, even if it was dimmed by frustration. For the first time, Kieran realized that talent alone would not carry him to the city or the scholarship. He needed guidance, mentorship, someone who could show him how to bridge the gap between where he was and where he wanted to be. The challenge seemed daunting, almost insurmountable, but the spark of hope remained. He understood that struggle was part of the journey, and that without confronting his weaknesses, the dream would remain just that, a dream. As he walked home, the evening sun casting long shadows across the village, Kieran made a quiet promise to himself. He would not let embarrassment or fear stop him. The first battle had been hard, but it had taught him an essential truth. To reach for a dream, he would need courage, persistence, and guidance. And somewhere, he hoped, that guidance was waiting. Chapter 4. A mentor appears. One warm evening, Kieran walked toward the village well, balancing an empty bucket in his hands. The sky glowed with orange and pink hues, and the air carried the familiar scents of dust and cooking fires. Lost in thought about his failed practice interview, he barely noticed the elderly woman sitting under a large neem tree near the path. She was watching him with gentle, curious eyes. "Hello, young man," she said, her voice calm and inviting. "I've seen you drawing in your notebook from time to time. Those sketches are very good." Kieran froze, clutching his bucket. It was Mrs. Angeli, a retired teacher who had once taught in the city. Her reputation for kindness and wisdom was well known, but he had never spoken to her before. "Would you like to tell me what you are drawing?" she asked. Her smile was warm, patient, and full of understanding. Kieran hesitated, but the spark of trust nudged him forward. He opened his notebook and showed her the sketches of imagined buildings and small plans he had drawn during quiet evenings. Mrs. Angeli's eyes lit up. "These are wonderful," she said. "You have a dream, don't you?" Kieran nodded, suddenly shy. "But English, it is difficult," he admitted softly. She nodded, as if she understood perfectly. "I can help you. We can learn together, step by step," she said. The first lesson was unlike anything Kieran had experienced. Instead of writing long lists of vocabulary, Mrs. Angeli blended English with stories about architecture, the shapes of buildings, and the lives of people who built them. She drew pictures, used gestures, and even turned simple words into games. "Say window," she prompted, pointing to a sketch of a building. "Now let's imagine a story where this window opens to a secret garden." Kieran laughed as he tried to repeat the words, stumbling at first, but feeling less pressure than in class. For the first time, English didn't feel like a wall blocking his dreams. It was a tool, a bridge he could use to connect his imagination to the world beyond the village. Mrs. Angeli encouraged him, praised his efforts, and made small corrections gently, without judgment. Kieran noticed that he could try, fail, and try again, and no one would laugh. At least, not here. Her presence made learning safe, inspiring, and even enjoyable. As the sun dipped lower, painting long shadows across the path, Kieran realized he felt hope again, a hope he hadn't felt since seeing the scholarship letter. The fear that had gripped him during his first struggles seemed lighter now, replaced with a cautious confidence. He understood that the journey ahead would still be hard, but with guidance, it was possible. Walking home that evening, Kieran carried more than just the water in his bucket. He carried a renewed sense of possibility. The village looked the same, yet everything felt different. Somewhere in the quiet of his heart, he knew that Mrs. Angeli's mentorship could transform his fear into courage, his struggle into progress. This was the moment when isolation gave way to support, and the path toward his dream began to take shape. Chapter 5. The Daily Battle. From the next morning, Kieran committed himself to a new routine. Before the first rays of sunlight touched the dusty rooftops, he would sit on the low wooden bench outside his home, English notebook in hand. He read aloud simple sentences, practicing the sounds of words that had once twisted in his mouth. "I want to learn. I want to succeed," he repeated over and over, until the words felt less foreign and more like a part of him. After chores and school, he returned home to write in his notebook. Each sentence was small, a description of a tree, a house, or a person, but writing them gave Kieran a quiet sense of achievement. Mrs. Angeli joined him every evening, guiding him through conversations, correcting gently, and encouraging him to speak without fear. "Tell me about your day, Kieran," she would say. He started hesitating less, and though his sentences were short and simple, they began to flow more naturally, yet not every day was bright. On some mornings, Kieran would stumble over even the simplest words: school, building, future. Each slip made him pause, his heart sinking a little. Sometimes, classmates would laugh during lessons, and old insecurities crept back, whispering that maybe he was not smart enough, that his dreams were too big. He felt the weight of the village's struggles and his own limitations pressing down, making progress feel fragile and slow. Still, Kieran noticed moments of light breaking through. One evening, he successfully described the layout of a small shop in English without hesitation. Another day, he told a short story about a bird flying over the hills, and Mrs. Angeli smiled, clapping softly. These small victories became tiny sparks of joy, each one proving that effort mattered more than perfection. Slowly, the balance began to shift. Fear and doubt were still there, but alongside them grew confidence, however quiet it was. Kieran learned to celebrate every achievement, no matter how small. He started speaking English with his friend, using phrases he had practiced, and even corrected himself when he made mistakes. Writing and reading aloud became rituals, almost comforting in their familiarity. He realized that steady effort, day after day, was slowly building a bridge from his fears to his dreams. As the weeks passed, the routine became a rhythm of growth. The struggle to remember words, the repeated practice, the minor frustrations, all of it shaped Kieran's resilience. He understood now that progress was rarely a straight line. Some days he felt he had moved backward, and other days, forward leaps reminded him of his potential. It was this push and pull, this dance of small victories and setbacks that prepared him for the moment when learning would meet reality. By the time the first real opportunity arrived to speak English outside his lessons, Kieran felt a quiet readiness stirring inside him. The daily battle had been exhausting, but it had also transformed him. He was no longer the boy who trembled at words. Each day of practice, each struggle, each tiny triumph had built a foundation for the test that awaited. And for the first time, Kieran could sense that his dream was not just a hope, it was becoming possible. Chapter 6. The first real test. It was late morning when Kieran noticed a stranger standing near the village square, looking around with a map in hand. The man approached cautiously and spoke in English, asking for directions to the nearest school. Kieran's stomach tightened instantly. His heart pounded in his chest, as if warning him to stay silent, to let someone else answer. For years, English had felt like an invisible wall, words slipping through his mind before he could catch them. Now, standing face to face with a real person who needed help, that wall seemed taller than ever. For a moment, Kieran froze. He could feel the weight of the scholarship, of Mrs. Angeli's guidance, and of his own dreams pressing down. The village seemed to fade around him. Then, with a deep breath, he remembered the routines he had followed day after day, reading aloud, writing sentences, practicing conversations. Slowly, He forced his voice forward, shaky but determined. H. Hello, sir, he began. You can go straight, then turn left. The school is there. The traveler tilted his head slightly, listening intently. Kieran continued, adding a few more details, pointing toward the road, explaining the turns carefully. His hands trembled slightly, but the words came. They were not perfect. The sentences were simple and halting, but they were clear. Each word felt like a small victory, proof that his months of effort had a purpose. When Kieran finished, the traveler smiled warmly. Thank you very much, he said. You were very helpful. That smile, simple and genuine, hit Kieran in the chest with more force than any praise he had ever received in class. Relief, pride, and joy mingled in a rush of emotion he could barely contain. He had done it. For the first time, his English had moved beyond paper and practice. It had lived, breathed, and worked in the real world. Walking back home, Kieran felt lighter, almost as if a small weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The fear that had once paralyzed him in class had transformed into something else, a quiet, steady confidence. He realized that learning was no longer just about memorizing words or repeating exercises. It was about connection, about using his knowledge to help others, to make himself understood, and to take action despite uncertainty. That evening, Kieran shared the experience with Mrs. Angeli. She listened, nodding, her eyes sparkling with pride. See, Kieran, she said gently, this is what your hard work has built. You are ready to face bigger challenges. One small step has shown you that you can do it. For Kieran, the village seemed different that night. The dusty roads, the low houses, the familiar hills, they all felt part of a bigger world that he could navigate with his own voice. The first real test had been small, but its impact was enormous. It showed him that the months of struggle, the daily battles, the fear and doubt, they had not been in vain. His confidence had grown, and with it, the courage to face the scholarship test looming ahead. Kieran lay down that night with a quiet smile. Fear had met action, and action had turned into triumph. And for the first time, he truly believed that he could turn his dream into reality. Chapter 7. The Countdown. With just 1 month remaining before the scholarship test, Kieran's days felt both longer and shorter at the same time. Each morning, he woke before sunrise, the village still quiet except for the crowing of roosters and the soft rustle of leaves. He would sit with his notebook, reading English passages aloud, trying to roll the words off his tongue smoothly. Some sentences came easily, and his voice even carried a small spark of confidence. Other times, words tangled in his mouth, stubborn and elusive, and he had to start over and over again. After helping his parents with chores, he would steal moments during the day to read short English stories or listen to recordings Mrs. Angeli had given him. He imagined the voices in the recordings as guides, patiently leading him through unfamiliar words, teaching him not only the language, but also patience. In the evenings, he would practice speaking aloud, sometimes alone, sometimes with Mrs. Angeli, who always reminded him, "It is okay to make mistakes. Each mistake is a step forward." But alongside the routine, anxiety crept in like a shadow. Kieran would lie in bed at night, staring at the dark ceiling, imagining himself in the exam room. His heart raced as he pictured blanking on the words he had worked so hard to learn. What if he forgot everything? What if he stumbled in front of the examiners? The fear felt heavy, almost physical, pressing down on his chest. Every small slip earlier in the day, the word he mispronounced, the sentence he couldn't remember, played on repeat in his mind, feeding his doubts. Yet even as fear tightened its grip, hope flickered just as brightly. He remembered the first time he had spoken to the traveler in English and the smile of pride from Mrs. Angeli. He remembered the long afternoons, the quiet mornings, the small victories that had built something larger than himself. Hope and fear battled inside him, each day a mix of triumph and uncertainty. The tension was exhausting but electric, pushing him to try harder, to focus more, to prepare like never before. Kieran's friends in the village noticed his quiet determination. They offered encouragement in small ways, a nod, a smile, a shared lunch, reminders that he was not alone in this journey. Even his parents, though worried, never stopped showing faith in him. Their silent belief became a lifeline, a gentle force reminding him that fear was natural, but giving up was not an option. As the days ticked by, Kieran began to notice subtle changes. He could speak longer sentences without stopping. He could understand more of the stories he listened to. Even when mistakes happened, he didn't feel crushed. They were now signs of progress, not failure. The countdown to the exam had become more than a measure of time. It was a test of courage, persistence, and self-belief. And so, night after night, Kieran lay down with the same mixture of nerves and excitement. Fear and hope intertwined like storm clouds and sunlight, each strengthening the other. He knew the scholarship test would be the ultimate challenge, but for the first time, he felt a quiet certainty. He was ready to face it. The next step in his journey was near, and he would meet it with all the courage he had cultivated over these weeks of preparation. Chapter 8. Test Day. The day of the scholarship test arrived with a mix of calm and storm inside Kieran. As the bus carried him into the city, he stared out at tall buildings, busy streets, and flashing signs, so different from his quiet village. His hands felt clammy, and his heart beat faster with each passing minute. The city smelled of fuel and dust, voices and movement, and for a moment he wondered if he truly belonged here. At the academy gates, he took a deep breath, gripping his bag tightly. Every lesson, every early morning, every mispronounced word suddenly felt alive, urging him forward. He reminded himself of Mrs. Angeli's words. Focus on understanding, not perfection. Speak with courage, and the words will follow. Inside the exam hall, rows of students sat quietly, each focused on their papers. Kieran's palms were sweaty as he scanned the reading passages. The sentences seemed long, full of words he recognized and others he had struggled with before. He remembered the exercises with Mrs. Angeli, breaking sentences into smaller parts, looking for context clues, and trusting his understanding. Slowly, carefully, he read each paragraph, underlining key ideas and translating phrases in his mind. Step by step, the text became less intimidating. When it was time for the speaking section, Kieran's throat tightened. He remembered the traveler in the village, the moments at home practicing aloud, the small victories that had built his confidence. Taking a deep breath, he spoke clearly, pausing when needed, focusing on conveying his ideas rather than racing for perfection. Each sentence felt like a test of courage. Every word was heavy with meaning, every pause a choice between doubt and determination. At times he stumbled. A word he had rehearsed slipped away, leaving him momentarily silent, but he corrected himself, pushing forward, refusing to let fear take over. The examiner nodded occasionally, encouraging him without saying a word. In that silence, Kieran realized that courage was as important as knowledge. The lessons, practice, and perseverance of months were now more powerful than anxiety. By the time the exam ended, Kieran felt a strange mix of relief and exhaustion. He had given everything he had, spoken as clearly as he could, understood as much as he could. Walking out of the hall, the city seemed both overwhelming and alive with possibility. The tension of waiting for results began to sink in, but he felt a quiet pride. He had faced the challenge head-on. The journey that had begun in his small village, with its dusty roads and simple homes, had led him here, into a room full of bright students, complicated questions, and his own determination. For the first time, he truly understood what it meant to step beyond fear, to meet opportunity, and to test himself not against others, but against his own limitations. As he left the academy, the city sun casting long shadows on the streets, Kieran felt both nervous and empowered. The test was done, but the waiting had just begun. And in that waiting, he carried the strength of all he had learned, the courage he had built, and the hope that his dream could finally become real. Chapter 9. The Result. A week passed slowly, each day dragging as Kieran went about his village chores with a distracted mind. Every time he saw the mailbox, his heart leapt, only to sink again when it was empty. Then, one afternoon, the postman arrived with a small envelope bearing the academy's seal. Kieran's hands trembled as he took it, his chest tightening with a mix of hope and fear. His parents gathered around, curious and anxious. His mother's fingers shook slightly as she broke the seal, while his father leaned closer, reading every word with care. For a long moment, silence filled the small house. Kieran felt as if the air itself held its breath, waiting for the news. Then his mother gasped, and his father's face broke into a wide smile. "Kieran, you did it! You've been accepted!" For a second, Kieran couldn't move. The words seemed unreal, almost like a dream. Then laughter erupted, mingled with tears of relief. His parents hugged him tightly, their pride and joy filling every corner of the room. Kieran's own tears began to fall, hot and unstoppable. He laughed, cried, and whispered words of thanks all at once, feeling the weight of months of struggle finally lift from his shoulders. Without a moment's hesitation, Kieran grabbed his bag and ran along the narrow village path toward Mrs. Angeli's home. Each step felt lighter than the last, the dirt under his feet turning into a ribbon of triumph. When he reached her door, he pounded on it urgently. "Mrs. Angeli, I passed! I really passed!" he shouted before she could even open it. The door swung open, and Mrs. Angeli's eyes widened with surprise, quickly softening into a warm, proud smile. She pulled Kieran into a gentle hug, and for a few moments, the world seemed to stop. "Kieran," she said softly, "you earned this. Every bit of effort, every mistake, every challenge, it brought you here. This is your success." Sitting together afterward, drinking tea in her sunlit kitchen, Kieran felt a warmth he had never known. He thought of all the early mornings spent reading aloud, the evenings of frustration when words slipped away, and the countless times he had wanted to give up. Every struggle had led him to this moment of triumph. The journey that began in a small, dusty village had brought him closer to a world of possibilities he had only dreamed of. That night, Lying on his mat under the faint glow of the moon, Kieran reflected on the transformation within himself. He understood something profound. Courage, patience, and persistence were more powerful than any obstacle, more valuable than money or immediate success. The bridge he had built through determination and learning could take him anywhere. For the first time, Kieran truly felt the joy of achieving a goal he once thought impossible. The fear, doubt, and struggle had not vanished. They had become the foundation of his strength. And in the quiet of his little home, surrounded by the soft sounds of the village, he knew that this was only the beginning of a life filled with hope, courage, and endless possibilities. Chapter 10. A New Beginning. The morning sun painted the dusty village roads in gold as Kieran tightened the straps of his small bag and took a deep breath. Today was the day he would leave for the city, the first step toward a life he had once only dreamed of. His heart raced with excitement and fear, a mixture that felt both heavy and electric. Every step toward the bus felt like stepping into a new world, one that was bigger, brighter, and full of possibilities. As he climbed onto the bus, he glanced back at the village he had always known, the narrow lanes, the familiar faces, the simple homes. It had been his world, safe and small, yet it had also felt limiting. Now, the dusty roads seemed to stretch behind him like a path he had crossed with courage and perseverance. He found a seat by the window and looked out at the fields, the hills, and the tiny streams reflecting the morning sun. The landscape blurred as the bus moved forward, carrying him toward the city, toward opportunities, and toward the future he had dared to imagine. Inside, the bus hummed with the chatter of other travelers, some curious, some indifferent. Kieran felt a nervous flutter in his chest as he thought about the new school, the new teachers, and the classmates he had yet to meet. English, which had once felt like a wall too high to climb, now felt more like a bridge. Every lesson with Mrs. Angeli, every small victory in his daily practice, every time he spoke to a visitor in the village had built this bridge. It was still shaky in places, but it was strong enough to carry him forward. When the bus reached the city, the streets seemed alive with movement and sound, taller buildings rising like mountains of glass and steel. Kieran's heart skipped a beat. The city was overwhelming, yet thrilling. He felt a surge of confidence as he remembered the weeks of effort, the hours of practice, and the courage it had taken to even consider this journey. His English was not perfect, but he could communicate. He could ask questions, introduce himself, and share his thoughts. That ability, earned through determination, felt more valuable than any words he had once feared. On his first day at the academy, Kieran felt a mixture of nerves and excitement. Walking through the gates, he reminded himself that fear was natural, but it did not define him. He had crossed the threshold from hesitation to action. Each conversation, each introduction, each lesson was another step toward growth. He realized that learning was not about perfection, but about courage, persistence, and the willingness to take one small step after another. That evening, as Kieran settled into his new room, he looked out over the city skyline, lights twinkling like stars. He thought of the boy who had once feared English, the boy who had doubted his dreams, and smiled. That boy had not disappeared. He had grown, learned, and found his voice. And now, standing at the edge of possibility, Kieran understood something simple and powerful. Every journey begins with a single step, and every dream is possible when courage meets action. The city stretched before him, vast and unknown, but Kieran no longer felt small. With his bag, his lessons, and his dreams, he was ready to embrace this new beginning, one word, one conversation, and one opportunity at a time. Thank you for joining us today and following Kieran's journey from doubt to courage, from fear to opportunity. His story reminds us that no matter where we start, every small effort, every word practiced, and every step taken toward learning can create real change. And just like Kieran, you too can use English as a bridge to your dreams, whether it's for school, work, travel, or simply speaking with confidence. If this story inspired you, imagine what the next one can do. Here on Learn English. By reading, we upload a new story every single day, carefully designed to help you improve your reading, listening, and speaking in English, while keeping you motivated and inspired. Each story is easy to follow, full of life lessons, and perfect for learners at your level. Don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, subscribe to our channel, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a daily story. Share it with friends or family who want to improve their English or who need a little motivation to chase their dreams. Remember, learning English is not about perfection. It's about courage, practice, and consistency. Keep listening, keep speaking, and keep believing in yourself. Your journey is just beginning, and every day is a new chance to grow. We can't wait to see you tomorrow for another inspiring story. Until then, keep your dreams alive and your English strong. See you in the next video.